Welcome to the Life's Best Medicine podcast, where we are finding hope and healing one episode at a time. No appointment needed, no rubber gloves, and no coping. Just a healthy dose of life lessons to help equip you for this wild journey we call life. Hello and welcome to the Life's Best Medicine podcast. This is going to be a fun one for me. This is a great doctor in town, a doc who I was in practice 17 years before moving closer to home. And so I get to town and I talk to one of my patients. I go, hey, do you know any cool doctors in town? And he goes, oh my gosh, my cardiologist is just like you. He's a cool guy. He's down to earth. He spends time with me. I said, really? What's his name? So it was Dr. Azimi, right? And so we've had time to actually meet each other. And because I was the new kid on the block, I didn't know anyone. So I'm like, hey, can you introduce me to someone? How do you guys practice medicine this way? Because I went from knowing everyone in town to nobody. So I was like, as a primary care, my job is to surround myself with the brightest, the best, the kindest doctors who I want to refer to. And Dr. Azimi is that doctor for me right now, a cardiologist. This guy has way more letters after his name, he's board certified, I think, in everything. It'll take me an hour to tell you that. So in the sake of time, Doc, thank you so much for joining me. It's so awesome to have someone like you on my podcast here.
Thank you kindly. Thank you for having me. And it's a joy to be here with you. Friday afternoon. Can't think of anything better to do at this time than to be with you talking about issues that kind of delve deeper into what we do every day and what kind of ticks us, what kind of motivates us. How do we come to where we are? And how is it that we can translate that into a meaningful exchange between the doctor and the patient, and how we get the patients to believe in what we want them to do? Otherwise, we're pretty useless, right? I could write 1 million prescriptions to a patient. If they don't buy into that, if they don't accept that as something they have to do for themselves, it's obviously not going to be fruitful. So for me, I think the best part of medicine is that interaction that you have between the doctor and the patient, the most sacred relationship where the patient comes to you, feels comfortable telling you anything. I can't think of many other fields where people feel that comfortable talking to somebody about issues that affect them on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, and your life experience, I think you've been through a lot in life, and so tell us your story, because I'd like to hear it too. I haven't heard the whole story, but I'd love to hear the story about how you coming to the U.S. and your training and how life's changed for you.
So it all begins in Kabul, Afghanistan, 1970. I was born. My mother was at that time not even in medical school. My father was in public health. My father had studied in the United States. He was open-minded. He spoke English. He had friends from America, and they together went around the villages and taught public health and cleanliness. We don't have the same type of sanitation in Afghanistan as America does. It's a much more advanced country and with more resources. But in 1973, my mother got a scholarship to go to Russia and study medicine. And, you think about Afghan culture. Now, we do have, advanced people and educated women and very successful women. But in general, it was not, the typical thing for a woman who was married to leave the country, leave her kids behind and go to study medicine in a foreign country, where she went to Simferopol and to Kiev and studied medicine there. So for 7 years, I didn't see my mother on a regular basis. She would come during the summers when she had some time off, and then we would see her. But the rest of the time, she was obviously pursuing her dream of becoming a physician. And she was actually a brilliant physician that I really admired and aspired to be like. So in 1979, she took me. She had 3 kids, my sister who's older and my younger brother, but she took me with her to her graduation from the Crimean Medical Institute. And so I was a 9-year-old kid, and the only thing I could think of is I want to do this, for a career. and that was my dream. And obviously, if I had it my way, I would have gone to school in Afghanistan and gotten a scholarship to go abroad somewhere, maybe the US, maybe France, maybe Russia, but I would have gotten the same type of an education. But what happened is, at the same time, a few months later, the Russians invaded Afghanistan. And when I was 9, all of a sudden the world changed. And so today, you look at America's kind of climate right now, and there's two sides in this political debate between, capitalism and socialism, and, what's better. Well, I can tell you that America is the haven that most people run to, as I did myself. And no matter what the deficiencies are in America, it's still the place people run to. And if you change it to the place like every place else, we'd be possibly escaping it, for reasons. Let's say we become a communist society. Most of us wouldn't want to be, citizens of that. But anyways, to move away from the politics, the Russians invaded. We were still living there because my father was US educated. Some people thought we were CIA. And because my mother was Soviet Union educated, people thought we were KGB. And honestly, as far as I know as a kid, we were neither, And we got a lot of harassment. Soldiers would come in the middle of the night and search through the house looking for, I don't know what. But after a while, my mom and dad, both educated, realized that our future wasn't very bright. So they decided to escape. And escape at that time, there were people flying out, going to India, going to Italy, going to other countries. But it was really hard to get permission and visa and flights. So my parents decided that we were going to escape, through the mountains. And so one morning, they told us we're leaving, and where are we going? They were afraid that if they told the kids would tell others, and then the government would find out, and they might get persecuted. And a lot of my father's friends disappeared, and they, the joke or the statement that I heard often is that they went to Siberia, but it's probable that they were executed, or God knows what happened to them. I can't assume anything, but I don't think that they're alive because we didn't hear from them again. So because of those kind of fears, we just were told, we're leaving. Where are you going? Grandma's house. We went to Grandma's house. And then we took a bus to a place, towards the country. And then we rented a Jeep that took us towards the mountains. And then during the day, the Russians would survey the land and look for people wanting to escape. And they didn't want that kind of immigration because it would make the world know that people weren't happy in escaping. So they were scared that we might get bombed. So we would travel at night. We would only travel during dark, and then when light came, hide in the villages with the populace. And after about 4 nights, we ended up in a place called Quetta, that's on the outskirts in Pakistan. And then my mom and dad knew some people in Peshawar, which is a part of Pakistan. And we went there, and quickly, my mother being a physician and my father having public health education, they were hired by a group called USAID or InterAid, INTER-8. And there was an international aid group that was establishing the camps for the refugees. So my mom became a primary care physician in the refugee camps, and my dad worked in public health sanitation for the camps. And then our life kind of picked up because during our time there, while we were refugees there, we had a better life because my mother was getting income from InterAid as a physician. My father was getting, income as a public health guy. But yet, despite all of that, we were really with an uncertain future. The first 6 months, we didn't have jobs. My parents didn't have jobs. So I slept on crates, and I slept in the open air. And it was kind of going from being somebody and being a doctor's son to being a person that's sleeping on crates was not the ideal experience for an 11-year-old at the time. But that was my life. And, I remember being so afraid of the salamanders that crawled in the, dry earth there and climbed over the crates and wondering if they were going to climb all over me at nights. But then once they got the jobs in the camps, we actually got a place, and my mom and dad had drivers and a cook, and they actually started to have a better life there despite the refugee status. But they realized that my future and my brother's future, my sister's future was not going to be very bright, you know, in those circumstances. So my father, who had studied in the United States, decided to use, you know, that and apply for asylum in the US. And so we did. And after 16 months or so, we were accepted to come to the US. And in 1983, August, we arrived in Portland, Maine, but actually the city that we ended up being refugees in was Waterville, Maine, which is a small town in central Maine where a college, Colby College, is. And besides that, there's not much else there. The paper company that was there went out in the 80s, and you know the whole climate and the economy changed after that. But anyways, so I was a teenager. You know, I came there. I couldn't speak a word of English. I mean, I think I knew yes, no, thank you, and the ABCs, but not much more than that. And I had a teacher that was a volunteer from the church, Mrs. Lavon Brown, who volunteered and taught me English. She would come in 3 hours a day and sit us and try to teach us. And before that, there was a teacher named Mrs. Austin. I remember them very vividly because they impacted my whole life. Where I am today wouldn't be possible without their guidance. So they couldn't speak my language and I couldn't speak their language. So they would, I remember, throw all the change on the table and go nickel, dime, you know, and then I would go nickel, dime. And then they learned that I was a visual learner as my brother. So we would watch film strips. And the first 6 months, I failed every class, math, English, everything was a failure. But at the end of the year, with their help, I actually had the highest grade in my English class, which I felt really proud of because they were all English-speaking American born, but it was with a lot of support and a lot of guidance and help from Mrs. Brown, who's dear to me even today, you know, because she taught me English. She gave me the resource, the tool that allowed me to do well in school. And school was hard because, you know, being an immigrant in a place where, you know, you're completely different. You it's not just language, it's not just culture, it's not which side of the street people drive. It's everything. And we were there. We moved to Winslow, Maine, which is a town of like a few thousand people, which is across the river, the Twin Cities, Waterville, Winslow. And that's where we were living. And my mom would take us to church. And we'd go to mass. We were sponsored by the Sisters of St. Joseph, Catholic, you know, nuns. And so that was kind of our way. And they encouraged us and they took us to church. And I would ask my mom, why are we going to church? You know, we were Muslim. And my mother would say, there's only one God. This is the house of God. We're going to go there. And I remember for the first few years going to Christmas Mass, you know, on December 25th, Christmas Eve. And I remember a lot of things, participating in things. But my mother was a very open-minded lady, enough to be a doctor in my homeland and enough to say that there's one God. It's the same God for all of us. If we agree that there's one God, then it's got to be the same God for all of us. And I like that, the way she taught me that, because it opened my mind. And when I went to college at Columbia, you know, I got a scholarship 5 years later to study chemistry at Columbia. And my first roommate was Jewish. You imagine if I didn't have my mom, I would have been probably filled with some degree of, you know, animosity, if you will. But we became really good friends. And the person who was my roommate is my best friend up to today. And I don't look at him as he's Jewish or I'm Muslim. And we had a lot of very deep discussions. You know, when you're young and you're studying, you learn from your school. But I think my experience at Columbia was I learned more from my peers in the city of New York than I did from the classroom. And I think that really enriched me. And it took a shy kid that was a refugee from Afghanistan that grew up in Maine and kind of let me flourish into a person who became, you know, gregarious and chatty. And, you know, what happened was I was in New York City. When I got into the Port Authority, you know, on the bus, I basically suddenly looked and I was like, whoa, this is not, you know, this is a different world and I need to figure out how to survive. The first week at Columbia, I didn't even leave my dorm. I was afraid to go out because I was like, this is an intimidating place. And I met a friend named Juan, and Juan was from the Bronx. And he said, it's not anything. It's just like any other place. And he took me out. And as I went out, I realized if I don't go out there and make friends, I'm not going to do well. So I actually was the guy who would go find somebody, a stranger, and go, hi, I'm Nassir. Where are you from? And soon we became friends. And I started to have a very, very good social life. But I think, you know, that helped me kind of become who I am today. And I think that helped me deal with patients, right? If you're shy, you're not going to be a very effective physician. So you have to be able to talk to people and be able to exchange in a meaningful way. But I did chemistry at Columbia and did really well. I was thinking about being a chemist, but I always wanted to be a doctor. And to go back to that doctor, you know, ambition, my mom and her graduation, and when I was in America, a lot of people asked me, hey, what do you want to do? And I would say with a very thick accent, a doctor. And they would grin because a lot of people, just like myself, didn't know how I was going to do it. I had to get better in English. I had to find my way. And then I remember Dr. Kramer at Boston University, my first interview, which I think was probably a illegal question. But the first thing he asked me is, how are you going to afford Boston University Medical School? And I told him what I told everybody, what I actually ended up doing, which is I'll borrow and I'll pay for it later. You know, that's how I did it. And that's how a lot of people did it, because it's very hard to afford a medical education, especially today. You know, when I paid for Dartmouth Medical School, it was in the 20,000 range. My student yesterday was telling me they pay 70,000 per year. And I'm like thinking, maybe it's not worth it. Take, you know, $280,000, give it to your kid. They can invest in a lot of things that could be more prosperous than medicine. But medicine, you don't go, as you know yourself, you don't go into medicine to be financially successful. You go into medicine because of that feeling that you get. You know, when they asked me, why do you want to be a doctor? And I looked at them and I didn't have a good answer, because it was, you know, my answer was, well, my mother's grad, which is a nice, beautiful story and actually probably would influence some. But I remember telling the person interviewing me, I said, because I'm selfish. And they said, really? And I said, yeah, I like the feeling I get when I help people. And that feeling of gratitude, right? The gratitude that they give you, the gratitude that you feel yourself is really the best payment on earth. And to be compensated for it financially is obviously great. And we do get reasonable compensation, although Medicare keeps cutting us. I'm still not complaining. I feel like, you know, every day people ask me, why do you smile? Why are you so cheerful? And I say, because I'm living a dream. I should have died in Afghanistan. I probably should have died on my escape from Afghanistan to Pakistan, because there are some things that happened that could have been, you know, proven fatal, but I didn't. And here I come to this country. I learn English. I get scholarship to Columbia University. I end up at Dartmouth Medical School. And then, of course, I go on to internal medicine at the University of Colorado, and then cardiology, nuclear interventional cardiology at Yale. I have 4 boards in medicine, cardiology, nuclear and interventional cardiology. I'm respected in my community. I've been voted by my peers as a top cardiologist, I think 7 of the last 8 years in this city. And, you know, Castle Connolly top doctor. But none of those accolades are really what kind of rewards you more than the feeling that you get that this person, this 98-year-old that I put a valve in yesterday, right, is going to live. And when she, you know, when she comes to my office, I'm going to be happy. When she comes like 5 years from now, I'm going to be even happier, assuming, as I told her and her family, that cancer or something else doesn't take over. But I'm amazed with the longevity of people. You know, I had a patient that I was called for in 2005 at Alvarado Hospital who was 93. I put in 5 stents in 3 arteries because I didn't think he would be a bypass candidate, right? And so then I go home and I'm thinking, you know, maybe I shouldn't have done that. Maybe, you know, 93 is a good age. Maybe we should be more conservative. And, you know, you go back and forth with these feelings. But at the same time, you know, quality of life and the quantity of life is really hard for us to gauge. You know, what you think is quality may not be for somebody else, right? But it's hard for me to project my views onto somebody else. So I have to ask them, what is it that you expect from this? So anyways, he got the stents. He wasn't my patient. He was another cardiologist who didn't do intervention. And what's interesting is that that cardiologist was much younger than him at 93. But fast forward to about 4 years ago, the cardiologist had already died of cancer. And that patient came into Grossmont Hospital at age 103, okay? And now they had to call somebody, and the guy asked for me to call him when I walked in. He said, Dr. Azimi. So what I'm saying to you is that 10 years that guy had extra with reasonable quality, is that something beneficial? You know, what number is the right number? You have somebody dying and they want one more day, right? So I'm not, because there's obviously an economic principle, but I'm just saying the gratitude that you feel by giving people things that mean so much, you know, the letter that you get from a patient that says, because of you, I got to see my great grandchildren, and I got, you know, these are really great sentiments, and they really do energize you and motivate you to keep wanting to do this for as long as possible. But that, I think the driving force for me is gratitude. As to what I said at my medical school interview, is that if somebody I can help, if I can make a difference, you know, I ask people, this is something you might like, is that I ask people, what does MD stand for? And everybody gives me a different answer, but most people say medical doctor. But actually, if I'm arguing with a pharmacist or somebody, I said, no, that stands for my decision, right? Because we decide and we're writing the orders and we're responsible for it. So MD stands for my decision. But MD also stands for what I think is more important, make a difference, right? We have to make a difference in our patients' lives, and we have to keep the economic, you know, kind of influences away. We have to do what we would do for our own family, for that patient that we're seeing. Otherwise, we're basically not ethical, right? Because if you have a different plan for your father than for your patient, that doesn't make a lot of sense. So pushing forward, trying to get the best done for your patient, given, you know, all the obstacles in our way, is a tough thing. When you get it achieved, you obviously feel good about it. You feel like you did what you're supposed to do. And I really like the idea, MD, make a difference. And I think we make differences in people's lives every day. And I know you do, because your patients, the ones I've seen, have said exactly that.
Yeah, I think we're cut from the same cloth. My story is not as exciting as yours, but you know, really, I just listening to your story, I was reflecting on that, because you come to America, these Catholic nuns are helping a Muslim kid to learn English, and look at the return on their investment in you. They invested in you, and you go and you change the world, and all these lives are saved, and people are blessed by you because they invested in you. They're not doctors, but they invested. They go, hey, let me help someone in need, even though they may believe different. And I think what I see in America and in society is that people use religion to divide people, and they use religion to say all those guys are bad. How many people, and I don't know, I would love to hear your experience, but you know, I had a medical assistant that was Sikh, and all these people come and go, why do you have a Muslim nurse? I'm like, well, she's not, but that doesn't matter either. I mean, why does it matter to you, right? Well, let's talk about this, because let me educate you a little bit. And for you, having a Jewish, you know, roommate, that you guys could love each other and say, okay, who cares? I don't care what your sexual preference is. I don't care. Like, these things, we divide ourselves so much based on, like, even within the Christian church, the Baptists don't like these guys, and the guys, the Catholics aren't real Christians. And you know, you get in all this garbage discussion rather than saying, do I love the person? Can I be a better, more decent person? And I think that's kind of the take home message I get from you too, is like, love all people. Like, you don't have to agree on everything.
Yeah, I had a professor in college, Professor Long. He was African-American, and we used to have small classes, you know, for philosophy discussions. And one day we were all sitting around the table, a relatively diverse group of students, and he was sitting at the head, and he asked everybody for us to describe him. And we all started with the same thing, you know, African-American, you know, Black, etc. And all of a sudden he said, you know, it's interesting to me that you guys are all talking about my skin color. None of you talked about my eye color. None of you talked about my, he said, we tend to look around and try to find differences that divide us. But if you look at us, we're a lot more similar than we are different. And if we use those similarities to bond with one another and help each other, we can make a bigger difference. And I think that really resonates with me, because when I go see people, I try my best to find similarities rather than differences, because there's a lot more similarities between you and I than there are differences, you know?
Yeah, I think that's the important thing. I think, so many times we just separate each other, even in medicine, right? Like cardiologists can have a different personality than the internal medicine ER docs. They're the hard driven, fast loving. They want to go and like hike and do, thrill seeking stuff. Surgeon wants to just fix you and send you on your way. Internal medicine wants to hold your hand more and talk to you. Family medicine, more compassion. But it's interesting, even within medicine, I see that there's egos and there's fighting. Like my specialty is the most important one and yours isn't, right? Like kick them over to the internal medicine, let them do all the admitting. I don't want to do paperwork. So we kind of hit that same thing. But I think as we're around more, we just realize, that we do have more in common. All of us do. We all want to go home and see our families at the end of the day. We want to be loved. We want to, invest in people and see that patient get better. I mean, in medicine, that's our gift. Like you're saying, we're selfish that way because I get paid so much when someone comes and says, hey, thank you, thank you for sending me to Dr. Azimi. I feel comfortable now. Thank you for making that referral, right? Or whatever it is, that we can really impact people. And like you said too, it's like they have to trust us in our judgment. Say, hey, look, here's the data, here's the science, but do I care about you or do I have a vested interest in that, right? Because you could stent everyone that comes to you, but you say, hey, you don't really need a stent. Maybe we try this. So I think it's very important that I think a lot of physicians that, one thing that I learned along the way is I had a cardiologist attending, and he said, Brian, never allow your lifestyle to dictate how you practice medicine. Meaning, don't feel like you have to do all these unnecessary procedures, work yourself to death because you want to have a nice car because you're a doctor, right? You get so caught up in the garbage stuff, that you kind of miss out on what's important and taking care of that patient and that ultimate trust or that most intimate relationship that we can have with the patient.
Yeah, I think that trust is sacred and you can't violate it. And I think, this idea that patients have to trust doctors should be universal. The problem is there are a minority of people that have violated that trust, have really caused a kind of a bad wave amongst us, affecting all of us. But in general, I don't think of any doctor that wakes up in the morning and goes, I'm going to go harm somebody. Everybody wakes up with the same intention that they had when they went to medical school, and the same intention that, the oath that we swear to, above all, do no harm, try your best to relieve suffering. And I think that's how we practice. And I wish we were trusted more, not just by patients, but more importantly, by insurances. They treat us like we're stealing from them, and we have to go through all kinds of steps to try to get things approved. And I'm like, a lot of times you're arguing with somebody who doesn't even have a medical license. And that really gets to me as a physician because, you go 17 years, 4 years of Columbia, 4 years at Dartmouth, 3 years of internal medicine, 2 years of research, 3 years of general cardiology, 1 year of interventional, and 1 year of nuclear. And here you are arguing with somebody who doesn't have any of that background to try to see if they should have a stress test.
Yeah, it's maddening. I dealt with the same thing. I stepped out of the insurance model, right? So those things I have a little bit more autonomy now, and I could really, really take care of the patient and not worry about taking care of the insurance company and making sure all my notes look pretty. I'd rather make sure that the patient's healthy. And I think a lot of us go through that. And I remember thinking I'm spending hours dealing with like being put on hold and, just this and what people have to understand is that this is what their doctor's going through. So that's why they don't want to learn about new nutrition stuff, or they don't want to learn about new stuff because they don't have time, because they only have 3 minutes with their patients, or 6 minutes sometimes, because they don't have time to talk about, hey, your wife left you and you're stressed out and tense. Maybe that's why you're getting chest pain, like stuff that you kind of have that doing your own practice, that you have a little bit more leeway because you can decide, okay, I won't see as many patients and I won't make as much money, but I'll help my patients that I can see.
Nobody in a black suit comes and tells you that you didn't do a 12 review of systems when you were focusing on the most important thing, which is maybe their depression or their anxiety or whatever issue they have, And I think we've gotten really away from medicine. I actually have a little poster that I made. We're no longer clinicians, we're clicicians. We click, yeah. And the note looks beautiful. I mean, I can show you beautiful notes with patients that are suffering because the patient kind of gets left to the side of the note, And I think if you take good care of the patient, the note should fall into place. But that is an issue, talking about getting things approved. Have you heard of platinum-orthodeoxia syndrome?
No.
Interesting, because I'm not trying to pick on you. It's a rare entity, okay? In my hospital, when I found the first case, none of our doctors, internists, cardiologists, pulmonologists had heard of it, okay? So I found over the years, when I found my first case, my professors at Yale haven't found a case, okay? But when I found my first case, I felt like it was the highlight of my career. I was 3 years in practice, and I found one, and it's basically platypnea, means breathing well when you're flat. Orthodeoxia means you desaturate when you're upright, and it usually has to do through a PFO or shunting. There are other reasons that people get it, but the common one that I deal with is through a patent foramen ovale. And most people, 1 in 4 people have a patent foramen ovale, but most of us don't desaturate when we're upright, okay? But this lady had a very unique presentation, had seen multiple doctors, pulmonologists, cardiologists. It happened to show up. A lot of the workup was already done because you have to rule out this, and this, and then what's left behind. So I said, you might have this. She was a medical writer. She Googled it herself and did internet searches. So anyway, she said, I think I might have it. So we found the PFO, and then I recommended that she consider closing it. I even said, you know, I'm not the expert on this. I had just read some articles in fellowship, and, you know, I said, if you want to go somewhere else, but there wasn't a lot of literature about it in the early 2000s. I mean, there were like 50 cases described worldwide, you know, over the previous history. So anyways, she accepted, I closed her PFO, and she got cured, okay? So I thought that was the only case I'm gonna see. It's like pheochromocytoma. If you see one, you may never, but if you do, you're not likely to see another one. So there comes the second one, okay? The third one was a 31-year-old woman that was told by her doctors nothing was wrong with her. In fact, 3 years prior, they found a PFO in her, but they didn't even tell her she had a PFO. So she somehow showed up in my office for a second opinion cardiology, and she tells me her story. And I said, you might have a PFO. Have you ever had any testing? She said, I had a TEE at such and such place. So I found the TEE and it showed a PFO. I said, well, you have this hole. And she's like, well, no, they didn't tell me about it, okay? But my third case became like my fifth cure, because by the time I figured out that's what she had, and by the time I recommended that she have it closed, I had to start writing letters to an insurance company. And they doubt everybody, but they're definitely going to doubt the guy from La Mesa about a rare condition, you know? So they wouldn't approve it. I sent case reports on my previous cases. I even sent them what turned out to be my third and fourth patient case report, and they were refusing it. Finally, after a year almost, I got them to approve it. I go to her. She says, well, I have finals. I'm on oxygen, and I'm thinking of waiting till after my finals to do this. So I said, that suits whatever you want. Do your thing, okay? So it got delayed, and I was supposed to do it, let's say around September, but it became February when she came back to me and said, hey, I want this thing done. So I scheduled her for March, okay? Because, you know, it takes a week or two to get things through. Apparently, the date that she was scheduled was 3 days after this thing expired. The prior auth expired. I didn't even know they expired, but they expired, okay? So now I'm thinking I just call them and they give me another prior auth. Back and forth, back and forth. It turned out it was a rheumatologist retired. Back and forth, refusing. You know, you put on hold, you gotta go through the operator, they connect you with the doctor, and you finally, so after the third conversation, I said, sir, you know, this is the situation. This lady has this. I really have to close it. I've had really good results and I've sent the case reports. And he goes, no, we don't approve PFO closures, okay? So I said, well, that doesn't make sense to me because you approved it a few months ago. He's like, we did? Do you have the letter? And I said, yes. So he asked me to fax the letter of them approving it. Once he saw that letter, then he sent me another approval.
Yeah. Those are things that they...
How much time we wasted. The poor lady suffered during that whole time. And then once I cured her, closed the PFO, no more desaturation, no more need for oxygen, no more other, visits, etc. If they could just take care of things once, they would have. A lot of times patients come to me, they have a stable situation. I recommend, let's say do either a stress test or sometimes an angiogram. They refuse it. By the time they approve it, the patient's had a heart attack, which costs them a lot more, So I just don't understand how these guys get away with it, and why.
And it's hard. It's hard with all the training you go through. We get meds denied. We get things denied all the time, and it's so frustrating. Because trust me, we, like you're saying, I've seen this rare condition multiple times, and that's part of life experience that we have, and that's what the value to the patient is, that we've seen these things. Like, oh, I know what you got. Like when my car's broken down, I'd love to have a mechanic go, I've seen this 30 times. I know exactly how to fix it. Instead of saying, yeah, we're going to rip your whole engine and try to figure this thing out. Like send them to the right person. And, and so these are things like, in medicine, we have the best job in the world, but we have to deal with these kind of bureaucracies and difficulties. And that's why, like what you're saying is sometimes the private sector can do a lot better. We just have to put pressure on them. And I have a guy who's coming in next week. He was 26 years old, basketball player, very fit, active, all of a sudden he's anemic. I said, why are you anemic? Wow. Any belly pain? Yeah, every once in a while. Anyways, I go, you need a colonoscopy. You're so profoundly anemic. And he ends up having metastatic colon cancer at 26 years of age. Wow. And he's still coming. He's fine now. They resected everything. It was a miracle. But they said, well, we're not going to approve a colonoscopy for a 26-year-old. That's ridiculous, doctor. I was like, well, he needs it. So I think we've all, where we had to step in and fight for people. And it's a frustrating business for sure. And especially because, when your heart's to help the thing and you don't like people who don't have the experience, you do tell them you can't. So that's part of it. So that's part of life's medicine too, is us getting experience enough to say, okay, I'm going to fight this one. I'm going to stand. This is important enough where I'm going to take my time away from my family. If it takes you 2 hours, that's not having dinner at home that night, but you're fighting for your patient. And I think that's a big thing. And I think a big thing too is we see a lot of physician burnout where doctors just have had it. Good people are leaving. Suicide rate among physicians is way up. And so I think there's a lot of that we see in our practice of medicine where you say, okay, how do we help those doctors who are struggling right now?
No, I think these are really important points that kind of spread awareness about these things. And then how do you kind of work with insurances and everybody wants everybody to be average. Like every time somebody comes with a cough and runny nose, it's got to be influenza. But you and I both know that sometimes it's not. You have to kind of keep up internal medicine. What I love about it is kind of gives you kind of this broad differential that you try to narrow in and you try to capture what the patient has. And if you don't think of something, one of my friends always says, what the eye doesn't see what the mind doesn't know. And in the house of God there was a rule that said if you don't take a temperature you won't find a fever. So you have to kind of know things to be able to apply that knowledge to particular situations.
Yeah, and I think just life experience, you start realizing this doesn't fit the model. This is not correct. Let's start looking at different options. That's what I had to do with my management of diabetes. I started realizing putting everyone on insulin is not going to fix the problem, right? So lifestyle is a key, and stress management. There's so many factors involved, that our life experience, when we start seeing things differently, whether it's religion or whatever it is, sometimes you have a different point of view, or someone may say, hey, you can come along and go, Brian, here's the problem. Let's fix this thing. Here we go. And I think, that's why we have to rely on each other in medicine. That's why we have to rely on each other in life. We all do our part to play our role, and I would love to, just transition for a second and tell this story you told me about the patient you had who happened to be instrumental in this college that I'm at, like your relationship with that patient.
So I had a very prominent patient who started the whole Shadow Mountain program, and he's written lots of different books on the topic of religion and Christianity. And actually, I have a lot of those books, and I have signed copies because he would give me the copies of those books, and for me to read, but also to have. And what was very unique was that we had a very good relationship. He could have picked any cardiologist in this city, but somehow that he and I and many other members of his family have bonded, and they trust me, and I took good care of them. But I also gained a lot from that relationship. And one way to say it is that you get nervous. I have 4 boards, but each time I get nervous. I've passed eight boards already, because I had to take them for the first time, and then I had to recertify, and then the USMLEs. But each time the tests come up, you get nervous. And I remember he was in the office with me, and we were chatting, and he said, you look distressed, young man. And at that time, I was my early years, I didn't have as much grade. And I said, yeah, I'm taking these boards, and I'm nervous about my internal medicine boards, because I don't practice. I mean, I practice internal medicine, but I'm not a primary care physician. I still treat the whole patient, but I'm not as up to date with it as I am in cardiology and interventional nuclear cardiology. So I have to kind of read more, right? So he looked at me and he said, when is your test? And I said, it's coming up next week. And he said, do you mind if I do a prayer for you? And I said, of course I don't mind, because I believe in God, and prayers, sometimes are more useful than other things, So he held my hand and he prayed, and somehow that prayer relaxed me, okay? And there is a value to being relaxed when you go to something, when you feel like you have a little edge or a little confidence or whatever it is. But that prayer gave me a little bit of strength, besides the fact that I was studying already, and I'm pretty good at taking tests. I took the test and I passed, okay? So, okay, coincidence, you should say, or maybe power of prayer. What was very interesting is that because of the way I've done these boards is that each year for 4 years, I have to take one, then the other, then the other, then for 6 years, I don't have it. And then the cycle repeats itself, right? So internal medicine, the next year, general cardiology, right? I didn't schedule him a week before my test, but he was scheduled. We had an appointment, and you could argue they were going to come very close, because if you're seeing somebody every 4 months, but not all boards are about the same time. Some boards are, in June, and others are in May, and others are in, the fall. But anyway, so it happened coincidentally that it was a visit. He talked to me, boards, prayer, boom, passed the boards, okay? So look, I could have passed the boards probably with my own efforts, okay? But the power that I see, the reason I see something at play outside is, what are the odds that I would have an appointment with, such a prominent person who believed in religion and prayer, who prayed for me every 3 different boards, okay? And so I started to say, maybe I passed more because there's a higher power that's helping us, and the same reason that I think that why some patients live and some die, even if we are the best at what we do, if God doesn't want it, or whoever you think God is, then it's not going to happen. So I feel like God works through Brian, God works through me, God works through all of us to help each other. I told you that anecdote of that lady that was very devout, and she, heavily prayed and did everything for her church. And then the flood came, and when the flood came, the firemen came and said, it's evacuation time. She said, don't worry, my God's gonna save me. You guys go. And they left, and the water levels rose, and the boats came and said, hey, you gotta go, we gotta save you. She said, no, don't worry, my higher power is gonna save me. And then she climbed up as the water levels rose and was on the roof, and the chopper came and said, hey, do you want to go? Because this is it, we're leaving. And she said, don't worry, my higher power will save me. And she drowned and died. And when in heaven asked God, what happened? I did all this stuff for you, and you weren't there for me. And God said, I sent you the firemen, I sent you the boats, I sent you the helicopter. So at some level, we got to just also do what it is that we need to do to try to get through things. But I do believe that God runs things. And my belief was only strengthened because of what happened with my patient and the prayers that he did for me. And I feel like that definitely helped me because I can't see it any other way.
Yeah, and you said you felt a presence. You felt a difference, like when he was praying for you. And I think the important thing was he wasn't trying to convert you to his religion. He just wanted to love you as a person and show appreciation for what you do, right?
No, he never. I mean, I have been invited to a lot of the things. I have participated in the large, celebration of Christmas at the Shadow Mountain Church. And it's really a beautiful concert with great music and a lot of, love. And then afterwards you go out into the tents, and there's all kinds of foods and celebration and kids. But I never felt like anybody's trying to influence me, whether there was the nuns, inviting us to church when I was young, or whether it was, Dr. LaHaye and the Shadow Mountain. To me, I always felt like it ultimately, I decide where I go, and I decide what I believe in, and people can guide me, people can expose me, but I feel like, nobody tried to influence me. But I feel like the reason he did all that for me is because he appreciated me as a person as I did him. And I had a greater kind of adoration for a man who was as accomplished as he was.
And tell the end of the story too, that you were at Disneyland with your family. What happened?
Oh yeah, so actually that was actually a sad thing that happened. I was in Disneyland enjoying time. It was actually a Thursday, and I was off, and I wasn't supposed to be working, but I got a call that your patient is in the hospital with a stroke, and I felt like, obviously somebody, of that, level of influence in my life, that I needed to be there. So I couldn't pick up the kids because I didn't want them to. So I borrowed a car. I left them there, and I came to San Diego. I went to the hospital. And then obviously when I saw what was not a good situation, we were able, with the help of the family, to make a transition to what I would call a death with dignity and a comfort, oriented approach. But I feel like, everything in life matters. And I think how we die and how we let people die is actually a big part of that. But everything went as one would expect, and as peacefully as one would expect. But I felt very good about the fact that I was there, because knowing him and knowing the circumstances, hearing the message from anyone is hard, but hearing it from somebody that you trust, that has been there, obviously could make a difference. And I think they did make a difference, because it was easier for people to go, he doesn't have any ulterior motives trying to tell us. And when people have faith, when people have religion, it's sometimes easier to let go, because there's this we will meet again kind of attitude, than this, like, what happens, we're all going to be left without our loved one.
Yeah, I think it's so important, because you were treating the family too, being there and showing them that you love, and you go, look, this is unsurvivable. The same thing happened with my grandma when she passed away. It's like, this is a unsurvivable lesion. And when people understand that, and being there to be a comfort, in that time, so that you could be a comfort for him and his family, just like he was for you. And I think that is the beauty of your story, and how people have reached out to you, and just, have you ever had a time where being of Muslim faith or Islam has been someone has treated you poorly for that? Has that ever been a detriment to you, or people judged you, or were derogatory towards you, or anything like that? Or was that never, did you ever
actually that? It happened to me. Okay, so I'll tell you, 9/11 2001, I was a resident, actually a fellow in cardiology at Yale in my first year, and I was seeing what everybody else saw. 9/11 2001, I was rounding, at the hospital at Yale New Haven, and I went into a room and I saw this movie on TV, and I told the patient, "What movie are you watching?" He goes, "No, that's the news." And I was devastated, because you remember, I ran away from a war, and I don't like violence, and I have never done anything to promote war or violence, so it kind of caught me off guard, to see that. And then I got really emotional as I went outside and saw that this was a reality, and these planes had hit these towers. And then I walked out and I went to another area, and there was another resident from a different field that came across me, and I didn't know him. I never met him really. And he just looked at me and said, "See what your people are up to." And that really, really hurt me, because they were not my people, my people, I have religion, I believe in God, but I don't have animosity towards any religion or any other human being. And in most religions, if you believe in God, God doesn't want you to hurt anybody, whether they're of your faith or opposite faith or of no faith. I don't believe in this idea that if you're an infidel, then I believe that God wants us to be good, to do good for one another. And it doesn't matter, who the other person is. But that was one of the few times in my life where I felt it, kind of hit me. But beyond that, I think people may have beliefs, people may have judgments, but I have not really witnessed it in a way where I felt harmed or harassed by it. And the other thing is that, you can live your life, like anybody. You can live your life as a victim, and you can always say, why me, and what happened, and this, and make excuses for everything that happens. Or you can make your life as a survivor. So if you're going to be like that, you got to be able to not let everything go and penetrate you. You have to be able to let things bounce off to some degree. But if it was a time that it penetrated me, it was on 2001, September 11th, that comment was said by a
yeah, that's horrible stuff, because I hear that, you hear that now. It's like all police are bad, or all this race are bad, or all this religion's bad. Instead of saying, hey, look, let's judge each other. Let's give each other the same compassion, right? That, someone like you who is a doctor who's saving lives. And as a matter of fact, I just got scolded by someone because when there was a terrorist attack recently, some Muslim guys ran in and rescued the people. And they were saying, like, how dare you, like uplift these guys? I go, these guys are heroes. They're heroes. What do you mean? Like, it's that judgment and those things where, we all realize, hey, we all hurt. We all go through stuff. Like your family went through all that. Cause I was thinking when you were talking about Afghanistan, I'm thinking, man, no one ever learns their lesson in Afghanistan. You're not going to win a war in Afghanistan. It's a total disaster going in there. But, but the bigger point is like, look, you guys wanted to be happy. Your family loved you. And where do they come for refuge? United States, right? And your parents probably had to give up a ton. Like, I don't know what they had to do if they did practice medicine here, or if they could do that, but they sacrificed a ton to get here. And people here badmouth the United States all the time and say how terrible the United States is. We're evil and bad. And it's like, you start believing that, or you believe all Muslims are bad, or all Christians are bad, or all older white guys with gray hair like me are bad. Then all of a sudden you're judging people that you don't know, and you're judging that this is how atrocities happen in the world, right? Because you make all whatever group bad. You make the Jews bad if you're German, and when you do that, you dehumanize people. So that's why I love your story about other people of different faiths helping you. That's what it's about. It's not like dividing everyone. It's being a kind, decent person and helping each other.
Yeah, and as I started with the first, few sentences, I think my life has been all about a lot of exterior forces, whether it's religion from outside, God helping me, because I really believe that God had to have a hand in all of it for me to be where I am today. But then all these people that were like, the firemen and the boats and the chopper that came into my life that has gotten me to where I am. When I first started in San Diego in 2005, I found Mrs. Brown. I felt like there's not going to be a lot of LaVon Browns in America. So I actually did a Google, and I found somebody in Massachusetts, and I called, and obviously I sound a lot different with my accent being washed and, a more mature voice. But she picked up the phone, and I said, do you know who this is? And she said, and then I told her, and then I invited her and her husband, and, her husband is actually a theology, minister, and he actually teaches theology and in a ministry. And actually that's how Mrs. Brown was in our town. They had, a ministry there. But anyways, they came to San Diego. We spent a nice afternoon, weekend, just doing stuff. And then the few other times they've called me, and I've dropped whatever I was doing. Okay. And I've gone to try to spend a few moments to show my gratitude, because without that, I wouldn't be who I am. But all these things that happen in my life, a lot of times people like to say, and I would love to say, hey, I made it through, Columbia, Dartmouth, Yale. I have all these accolades, and I did it. Look at me. I'm the one who did it. But the truth is, I had a part in it, but I didn't do it all. I had to have, just like the seed and the plant, without water and earth and soil and, nourishment, none of us get to where we are. And, nourishment is not the food that you eat in the cafeteria. Nourishment is the spiritual help and the support and the parenting. I mean, my mother, came to the United States. I don't think I told you, when she got here, she couldn't pass the USMLEs, ECFMGs. She passed the clinical sciences, but not the basic sciences. And I now realize why, because the basic sciences, if you and I took it now, have advanced so much, we wouldn't pass it because of the new products that have developed over the last, 20 years or so. So anyways, she went and worked as a nurse's aide. Now think of a physician getting the job, and basically not of an intermediary, but of a, starting position in any hospital, in basically cleaning patients and doing that. And so she would tell me, I've done this, I've started this, so you could be better, and you owe it to me to be better. And her, keeping me away from drugs, her bringing me to church, her bringing me to whatever things that kind of kept me out of the elements is really important to me. Now, she passed away in 2009 from cancer, but she's with me all the time. But it's not just my mother, it's people like Dr. LaHaye, it's people from my high school, Mr. Vachon, who was my Latin teacher, who, kept me in school when periods when my life was so stressful, where I thought about dropping out, even though it was not at school or grade related things. There were other things happening. But these people obviously are the reasons that I am here and I'm doing this. And I think, in a way, if you think about it, good teachers are essential in everybody's life. And so they should feel the pride and the satisfaction and the gratitude that we feel because it's because of them that we are able to do what we're doing. And that's how I felt all my life.
Yeah, and I think that's important. For me as a doc, I've taken pieces of so many people I've met and I've molded that. And sometimes you throw that arrow in your quiver, right? You're ready, like you have a new tool. Like I learned stuff from you, I learned stuff from other people and go, wow, that's amazing. And let me learn from your perspective. And I think in America, we've kind of lost that idea of saying, hey, you see the world differently. Why? Instead of saying you're a jerk, you see the world differently than me. Instead of saying, hey, explain from one of my best friends in the world is Muslim from Iran. And I'm like, explain this. I don't understand this part of your religion. He goes, oh, Brian, here's what it is. I'm not being, and he goes, Brian, how come you guys believe this? And it's always been respectful and kind, and no one's trying to convert each other, but it's saying, oh, I never saw it that way. So that's why culturally this happens. So you can say, oh, I get it now. And so if someone's standing too close to me, it's not that they're being rude. That's cultural, right? And we keep a certain social distance or whatever it is. Now we all social distance. So I guess it doesn't matter anymore. But, when you start learning, go, oh, it's beautiful. Like you have your beautiful culture. Like you say, hey, Brian, let me try this type of food. You've never tried this before. This is cool. Or everyone brings their little piece of the equation or something that is beautiful from what they learn. I think so many of us are so afraid and scared. And so we judge each other a lot and we don't give each other the benefit of the doubt. So man, it's so awesome having you on. I love this conversation. Obviously we're going to get to know each other a lot better doing, working together and taking care of patients. But the thing I knew about you before I met you is your patients love you and they say, this guy's a great guy. He cares. And like, you know what, you could be the smartest guy. I don't care how many degrees, all that stuff. If you don't care and the patient doesn't believe you care, forget it. It's all for nothing. And I hope medical students listening, hear this too. It's like, hey, don't be arrogant. Like your mom saying, hey, look, I'll do what I have to do. I have a friend who's a high-end engineer and he was making tons of money. And guess what? He loses his job. The engineering market fell through. There's nothing opening. So he was mowing lawns. And I go, man, how's that? And he goes, hey, I got to support my family. But once I get my engineering job, it's going to cost you a lot of money to get your lawn mowed, right? But right now I need the money, so I'll do whatever it takes. So you realize, like you do what you have to just survive. And I think in America right now, these are lessons of, I think we've been spoiled so much that we don't realize like what you went through coming here and, sleeping in the open air and being worried for your life and, people kicking in your door in the middle of the night looking for documents. And it's scary, and kids in the inner city go through the same thing and their worldview is going to be different than ours at this point. But, so as a cardiologist and, what you've been through, what are your parting words of wisdom on your deathbed? What do you tell people? Say, look, guys, here's what really matters. Here's what's important.
I think, it's all cliche, but I think it's what I've learned already. People told me when I was young that, your family is the most important thing and, spend time with them and make quality time and spend time, as much as possible. And I say, yeah, the time will come. And then all of a sudden, 16 years go by and your daughter is, getting a driver's license and you suddenly realize, man, I let this thing... The advice that was given to me, I didn't follow. And so I would say for all of us, the things that matter the most are your family, your circle of friends. That's what's going to get you through the hardships. You're going to have a lot of people around you when you're having, success and prosperity. But when things aren't going so well, you're going to need the people that are going to be there for you, which is usually your family and your friends. And so I think that's what I keep thinking about. That's why, you know, I feel bad because I spent a lot of time sacrificing my youth for getting to be a doctor, but I didn't get much time with my mom, not when I was a kid because she went to Russia, and not when I was older because, you know, we went to many different places, but I wasn't home. And I thought that I would enjoy that time once I finished, but then she got cancer and she passed away. So I would say, you know, time is not forever. Time is, you know, a very important commodity, more important than any money, any luxury that we can get. And the way we appreciate that time is when we're in our last few hours or last few days, and then suddenly we go, where did all this time go by? So instead of waiting for that, right? You just asked me what I would be thinking about during that. Instead of waiting for that, I've learned now in a more middle age, right, that I think I need to spend more time with my family. I need to keep focused on my career. I can't compare myself with others. You know, I may be better than some, I may be a lot worse than others, but I just have to focus on me, my family, and my work and my patients. And that's what I would advise my students. I had a student with me this month, you met, and I told them the same exact thing.
Yeah, that's truth. That's truth. Hey, guys, this is Life's Best Medicine. This is a treat for me. This is awesome getting to know a new doc and his life experience. And now I understand a lot better. And I think, you know, really, guys, don't be afraid of each other. Don't be resentful of each other. You know, love your family. I think there's no better medicine than that. Loving your family, loving your friends, you know, living in a way where, you never know. We see it. You know, some people, Dr. Azimi will see people take their last breath, and people that weren't planning on that happening, or you know, and sometimes he'll be able to come in and save them, and sometimes he can't. But, you know, a big part of it is like saying, hey, you never know. Pretend like it's your last day if it's not your last day. And man, I'm blessed to have you here, brother. And it's just awesome to be able to share life with you. And I'm excited about the years ahead of us working together and really helping patients. And for me, it's a comfort having such a great doc in town here who can introduce me to everyone too. But also just to say, hey, look, you know, we're going to take care of people and we're going to love people. And when there's hardship in the world, where there's bad stuff, we'll come together and help out and try to relieve some of that anxiety and suffering.
And you know, one thing that I've always believed in, and it's really hard to actually follow it myself, is that laughter is the best medicine. There's a lot of you know, publication showing about the cytokines and the endorphins and things that laughter kind of releases. You know, so I used to always say, never let them take away your smile. You know, that's why I try my best, even on my bad days, to put on that smile. And then if I can pass that on, because as you know, your joy and your laughter and your smile is contagious. People mimic each other. When you smile at somebody, they smile back. And then that's like a wave, you know, like remember Costanza when he said, that's my wave, I started it. But if you give a smile to that guy and that guy gives it to the next guy, it's beautiful. And so I think in life, you know, family, friends, patients, colleagues, neighbors, if we all can just pass a little bit of that laughter and joy and smile, I think we'd be better off. And so that would be another really important parting gift I'd like to give. You know, I just smiled and there I see you smiling. So I know it's contagious.
Yeah, it is. And that's an amen to that. And, you know, I think that's so true. It's just like, hey, spread the joy, spread happiness. Don't go around frowning and making everyone else down. Say, hey, let's try to make things better. And I think laughing at ourselves is good medicine too. And just go, okay, I screwed that one up. Okay, let's move on. Right. So, you know, it's so awesome to have you, Doc, and, you know, keep up the great work. Thank you for spending your time. I know your time is more valuable for me because I know you guys get paid an hour compared to what I do, but it's just been awesome spending this time. But I think some people's brains are going to be thinking, and you planted seeds, and you've done a lot to help people think. And so, and me also. So thank you for your time, and we'll be talking. Have a great weekend.
You too. Thank you. Have a nice day.
Hey, and everyone out there, thank you for sticking with us. I know we went a little long, but this is critical life information. And remember, be kind to yourself, be kind to others, and go out and conquer your week. thank you for listening to this episode. We greatly appreciate your support. We would greatly appreciate a positive thumbs up on all of the platforms like iTunes and Spotify or wherever you're listening. And we just thank you for our Patreon supporters. We greatly appreciate your help in getting this message out. We think there's a lot of important information, and hopefully this helps you. Have a great day, and thank you for listening, and thank you for your support.